Welcome to my program, Journey to Great Business. My name is Rajiv Jaiswal and I'm a business consultant. And I have put together this series called Journey to Great Business, which is going to provide you information and tips on what you can do in your business to make your business great. So, today I'm going to talk to you about something that's important, which are the 9 selling skills that you must have. Now, many times we see that the salespeople need to use some skills, but they're actually not using their skills or they are not using them properly. So let's talk about all the skills that are really required to get the salespeople up to speed and perform better. So I've broken this whole program into 2 parts. The first part is going to talk to you about these 4 points, and the second part is going to talk to you about the last 5 points. So let's start about the first, that selling is not about you. Sales is not about you. Many salespeople go out and start talking to the customer about what they know, how great their company is, what is a nice product that they have, how it has benefited so many other customers, and they go and on talking about what they know, what they do, and what testimonials they have, what references they have. But what happens most of the times, the salesperson is not listening to the customer. He is not listening to what the customer is saying or what the customer wants. He is only trying to tell them what he knows and what he wants to say. But the customer doesn't care about you unless you care about him. So you have to listen to the customer very carefully. So what do you do? What do you need to do? First of all, when you go and start making the pitch, you have to build trust with the customers. The most important thing is trust. Now, how do you build this trust? You build this trust by asking a lot of questions. Questions, good questions, questions which are on time, just at the time when the issue is arising. Tough questions, difficult questions. Sometimes the customer might not be willing to answer, but you need to ask those tough questions. The idea of asking all these questions is that you need to develop a relationship with the customer. He should have trust in you. You should show him that you are the expert in your particular field, that you will be able to guide him, advise him in the right manner to help him achieve his solution, to help him resolve his problems. This way, you can show to him that you're actually listening, you're actually caring for him, you're actually doing what really needs to be done. Now, the second thing that you need to do is you need to handle resistance. Many of us talk about handling objections, but objections arise much later than resistance. Now, let me give you an example. Just as our body begins to tell us that, I have a stress here, I have a stress in the back, I have a stress in my arm, my neck, and initially the body is saying, look, this is going to become a problem, and if you don't care for that symptom, it is going to become a problem. We suddenly have a problem in the neck, we have to go to a physiotherapist, and it takes much longer for us to resolve that problem. If we had taken care of this at the beginning when the symptoms were happening, it would have been much easier to resolve the problem. Just in the same manner, the customer, the prospect, is also giving us signals that the resistance is rising, right? And for us, it's easier to handle at the time of resistance. So, how does actually resistance show up? Resistance shows up in many forms. The customer is not interested. He talks about your price is too expensive, your quality is not good, I don't like these features, they don't help for me, I'm happy with my existing suppliers. There are so many ways in which he talks about not wanting to engage with you, right? There are no questions. You're telling him something, there are no questions. He's just listening to you. He's not even answering you, right? So in this method, the customer begins to show his resistance. And what is it that you really need to recognize apart from these things is that you might look at him, he will give you a look, a shrug. You say something that my product is so good, he just shrugs his shoulders and nods his head in a slight manner. If you don't recognize these things at that point of time, you will not realize that this resistance is rising. He may ask you a loaded question. He may say, I'm not sure about your product. These are the places where you can actually begin to recognize that the resistance of the customer is going up. Now, what do you do? How do you deal with the customers? Now, you engage with the customer. So, when you see the resistance increasing, when you see a certain signal about a resistance, you must engage with the customer there and then. So, sometimes you might even say, look, I agree with what you're saying, and you're right. I agree with what you're saying. And sometimes I also feel this way. But how can we work together to resolve it? What are the things that we can do? you know if he says something that does not agree with you, or something that he's saying, just acknowledge that and say, yes, I understand the way you feel, and I'd like to engage you like this. So you have to ask questions. The basis of every good sale of dealing with resistance is, what are the things you can do? So you need to agree with him, acknowledge him, question him. And if you don't handle the resistance at this stage, at a later stage, like I said, these will become objections, and objections are going to be much more difficult to handle. And when we really come to the objection stage, suppose we have reached the objection stage, what are we trying to do? If we haven't handled the resistance in the earlier stage, where we have not recognized, we will try to sell him to justify our position. We will try to be harder and stronger at him. We will give him logic, we will give him benefits, we will give him charts, and all the testimonials and rationalization that we have, in order to reduce the objection of the customer. But what happens is, if we have not handled the resistance, the more we talk about all these things, the more we talk about the logic and the benefits and selling positions and all that, the more the resistance goes up, and it does not help in solving the problem. That's why it's very important for us to start handling the resistance in the beginning itself. Now, the next thing is that it's important to listen. Now, you'll say that I have already said all of those things above, but it's something that so many marketing gurus have said, that you have one mouth, you have 2 ears, you should listen twice, you should speak less. But most salespeople still do not follow this principle, and that's why I have highlighted it separately, to make sure that the importance of these things is highlighted. However, remember, it's not always going to be through your sales cycle, through your cycle from your initial prospect right the way till the end of the closure. This is not going to happen like that. In the beginning, when you make the sales pitch, in the first call, or maybe the first two calls, or maybe when you're trying to convert a lead into a prospect, you might have to talk a little more, right? Because you are explaining your company, your product. But once you have done that, before you give him a solution, before you actually provide him a solution to what he's actually can be used to resolve his problem, you need to start listening even more. You need to listen in detail. You need to listen to understand. The objective of what we are saying is not just to listen, to hear, to quickly reply, right? It is that we really need to comprehend what we have to what he's trying to say. But many times, what's happening, the salesperson is already busy in his mind. He's formulating an answer to what has to be said. He's already thinking that, okay, if the customer is asking these, that means he means this, he means this. He's already jumped 3 steps ahead, and he's trying to resolve and trying to create those answers in his mind, because of which he's actually not listening to the customer. So that's why the salesperson has to stop the chatter in his mind. He has to stop what his mind is saying. Many times we are sitting with a customer and we feel, this customer doesn't know anything. Let me educate him. This customer is all talking nonsense. Or this customer thinks he's too much. So we are already making the assumptions about what the customer is asking us. We are trying to create answers. We are trying to go ahead of him. We are trying to sort him. We are trying to answer his questions. So it's creating a problem, because that chatter in the mind is not allowing us to listen, right? And this can create much more problems for you, because what is happening is, when the customer is asking questions, since we are so busy already answering him in our mind, we have not listened to what he wants, and therefore we are not able to give him the proper solution. And in the end, this is not going to help us to get the order. To overcome how do you actually overcome? So it's very easy to say that, yes, you overcome this chatter in the mind, but what the best way to do it is we really need to define a sales process, do role plays, because when we are doing role plays we are doing the same things that the customer is doing uh, to us, and this that is at that point we are actually creating that chatter in our mind, right? We should do the training, we should do the role process, the role plays again and again and again, and until it becomes a part of us, a nature of us, that we do not have our mind chatter telling us that the customer is not right or that we need to answer too many things. We should train ourselves to listen more and answer the questions based on what the customer is asking, not based on what we think he wants to know. Now, the next thing is that many times we need a we want to do a sale. We need with every business or every manufacturing process or any process that we do, we always have a process. We define how it's going to start, how it's going to be the middle, what's going to be the end, so that we can get a repeatable performance. If you take the example of manufacturing, we build quality by making processes which will tell us this is how we should load the material, this is how we should process the material, this is how we should check for the size, and this is how you will get the final output. In the same way, for our sales also, we should have a sales process. The reason is that when you have a sales process, you know what are the things you are supposed to do in order to achieve your end goal. Because while you are actually doing the sales process, you may fear that you lose your way and that you get distracted because some other thing will happen during the process and you will not know where you are going and you will take too much time, right? You When you also have a sales process, you know at which stage you are in, whether you are in the first stage, the middle stage, or the end stage, and based on that you know what you have to do. So you don't have to worry, you know that you will reach the end, right? You know what progress you are making. So all of these things help you to have a better output in sales. But the interesting thing is that research shows that only 15% of the companies across the world have a well-defined sales process, right? But even those 50 out of those 15 companies, those companies that have made the sales process, many times the sales process is not used. What many companies think, or what many salespeople, or what many managers think, is that sales is an intuitive process. People who come into sales, they know how to sell. They are born with sales, but that's not how it is. Sales is also a process. It can be trained, it can be made effective. So we really need to have a good sales process in place. Now, many times when a sale process is introduced, people don't use it. Why they don't use it? Because the process is inefficient. The process has been just made. It's not something that they can remember easily. It's not memorable. It's not applicable to the things that they are doing, right? Or there is no commitment. People are not at all ready to take care of it, not ready to go with it, or they have not been trained about it, right? So the training that you do, you just do the training and leave it at that. You don't make sure that whatever training you have given to the salespeople has been imbibed by them. It's like a rubber band. If I pull a rubber band in the training program, let's say if I take a rubber band and I pull it, the moment I leave the rubber band, it will go back to its original position, right? People are like that. When you train them, you are stretching the rubber band, but the moment they come out of the training, slowly they will go back to their normal place. So in order to make sure that they have learned the right things, you have to train again and again and measure and see whether they are actually learned the process or not. So we first of all, we should get the right process. We should train our people. Every person who gets trained, every salesperson has different strengths and weaknesses. So we should evaluate, we should check out what is each person's strength and weaknesses, and provide them training in those areas where they are weak, so that their weaknesses can also become strengths. And we should also give them training in the area of strength so that we can reinforce and we can strengthen those strengths so that they can go out and perform for us. Ultimately, if a salesperson performs, it is for the benefit of the company, right? And sales always precedes everything else. That's why you should always plan for your salespeople ahead of the curve so that when they are in place, they are there to take advantage of any upward growth and bring in more business for the company. So, thank you so much for listening to me. And I will be bringing out my other last second video on the sales nine tricks and 9 things that you need to learn about sales. If you like to subscribe to my video, I would be very happy. And if you want any answers to any questions, please put them in the chat box. I will be happy to write to you. Thank you for listening to Journey to Great Business.